London, autumn 1943. In a requisitioned building on Baker Street, behind blackout curtains and guarded doors, a particular kind of war is being engineered. Not the war of bombs and bullets, but the war of phantom armies and invisible transmissions. A conflict fought in the electromagnetic spectrum, where a carefully crafted lie can immobilize an entire panzer division more effectively than any air raid. The concept emerges from the convergence of three bureaucracies: the Special Operations Executive, the American Office of Strategic Services, and a London Controlling Section, the latter responsible for strategic deception across all theaters. Their collaboration produces Operation Whisper, a radio deception scheme of unprecedented ambition. The objective is elegant in its simplicity and nightmarish in its execution: to flood German signals intelligence with plausible but false Allied radio traffic, creating phantom military formations that will draw enemy forces away from actual invasion preparations. The operation requires specialists who understand both the technical minutiae of military radio communications and the psychological patterns of radio operators under field conditions. Former signals officers are recruited alongside theater actors, linguists, and mathematicians. They study captured Wehrmacht signals logs, analyzing the rhythms and habits of real Allied radio nets. Every genuine transmission carries signatures, operator idiosyncrasies in Morse timing, procedural quirks, even consistent spelling errors. These must be replicated perfectly. The Germans have been listening to Allied signals for 4 years. Their analysts can identify individual British radio operators by their keying style alone, recognizing personal Morse signatures as distinctive as handwriting. The planners construct elaborate false order of battle scenarios on paper first. Phantom divisions are given numerical designations, fictional commanders, imaginary supply chains. Supporting documentation is created, fake unit patches designed and manufactured, false insignia sewn onto uniforms that will never be worn in combat, fraudulent movement orders typed on authentic letterhead and deliberately allowed to fall into enemy hands. But the heart of the deception lives in radio traffic, the continuous electromagnetic chatter that, to German listening posts, suggests the presence of real formations preparing for real operations. Part 1. Transmission begins. The first operational team inserts into occupied France on a moonless night in February 1944, dropped by Lysander aircraft into a field near Angers. 3 men: a British SOE wireless operator named Thomas Wickham, an American OSS signal specialist, and a free French guide who knows the local terrain. They carry, among other equipment, a Mark II suitcase transmitter, a portable wireless set built into a leather case, valve-powered, capable of both continuous wave Morse and voice transmission on frequencies between 3 and 16 megahertz. The transmitter weighs 32 pounds. Its battery pack adds another 18. The men also carry a collapsible antenna system, cipher materials sealed in waterproof pouches, and forged identity papers declaring them to be agricultural equipment salesmen. The radio itself is a marvel of compressed engineering. 12 valves, a tuning range marked in meters rather than megahertz, a Morse key mounted directly onto the case interior. With a proper antenna and good atmospheric conditions, it can reach London from anywhere in France. But reaching London is not their mission. Their mission is to be heard by the Germans. They are met at the landing field by members of the local resistance, who guide them through hedgerows and along cart paths to a farmhouse 5 kilometers distant. The farm belongs to a widow whose husband was killed in 1940. She asks no questions. Her barn's hayloft becomes the first transmission site. Wickham and the American, whose cover name is Martin, spend the pre-dawn hours rigging their antenna, a long wire stretch between the barn and an oak tree, configured as a simple but effective end-fed radiator. The wire is agricultural fence wire, indistinguishable from the legitimate fencing material scattered across every farm in Normandy. In daylight, it will be invisible to aerial reconnaissance. At 0430 hours, as February darkness begins yielding to gray dawn, Wickham powers up the transmitter. The valves glow orange through ventilation slots in the suitcase. He tunes to 6.2 megahertz, a frequency used by genuine British 8th Army signals, traffic in Italy. Traffic the Germans monitor constantly. His hand rests on the Morse key. Beside him, Martin holds a message pad containing the night's scripted transmission, a false logistics report ostensibly from a British supply depot requesting ammunition resupply for a Phantom armored unit. The message is authentic in every detail except its content. It follows standard British Army signals procedure, proper preamble, correct call signs for the fictional unit, appropriate formatting for a logistics request. Even the transmission timing is calculated, sent during a window when genuine British signals traffic is normally active, buried in the electromagnetic noise of real communications. Wickham begins sending. His fist, radio operator slang for keying style, mimics the characteristic rhythm of a genuine British Army signaler he studied for weeks in training. Fast, but not rushed, with distinctive spacing between words and a slight hesitation before numbers. The transmission lasts 4 minutes. When finished, Wickham powers down immediately, disconnects the antenna, and moves the transmitter to a prepared hiding spot beneath loose floorboards. The entire transmission site must be struck within 20 minutes. German direction finding vehicles can triangulate a transmitter's position with alarming speed. They transmit 3 times over the next week, each time from a different location within a 15-kilometer radius. The pattern is deliberate, too frequent, and the Germans will suspect deception. Too infrequent, and the Phantom unit lacks credibility. The transmissions build a narrative, a fictional British tank supply depot establishing itself in the Loire Valley, preparing to support armored operations that will never occur. Part 2, the listeners. 40 kilometers east, in a requisitioned chateau, a German signals intelligence unit maintains its vigil. Hauptmann Dieter Hoffmann commands a section responsible for monitoring Allied wireless traffic in western France. His operation room occupies what was once a ballroom. Now it houses 8 receiver positions, each manned by a specialist operator wearing headphones, one hand on a tuning knob, the other poised over a typewriter. The Germans have been refining their signals intelligence apparatus since 1940. By 1944, it is sophisticated and effective. Each receiver station covers specific frequency bands, continuously scanning for Allied transmissions. When a signal is detected, the operator logs its frequency, estimated strength, and content. More importantly, direction-finding equipment attempts to locate the source. The Wehrmacht employs mobile DF units, converted trucks carrying rotating loop antennas and specialized receivers. 3 such units, positioned at different locations, can triangulate a transmitter through cross-bearing. Each unit takes a compass bearing toward the signal source, and where the bearings intersect marks the transmission point. In ideal conditions, with a transmitter operating for more than 5 minutes, German DF teams can pinpoint its location within a few hundred meters. Hoffmann's operators detect Wickham's first transmission immediately. The signal is strong, clear, operating on a known British frequency. The content, once decoded, appears routine, a supply request properly formatted. Nothing unusual except its origin in an unexpected location. The transmission is logged, its bearing noted, but not considered high priority. British signals appear constantly. Not every transmission warrants aggressive pursuit, but Hoffmann is thorough. Over subsequent days, as additional transmissions arrive from the same general area, he begins correlating them. The call signs suggest a logistics unit. The content implies armored forces requiring resupply. He cross-references this against known British order of battle. Intelligence from other sources, aerial reconnaissance. Agent reports, intercepted mail, provides no confirmation of British armor in the Loire Valley. But the absence of confirmation is not confirmation of absence. British formations are constantly repositioning ahead of the anticipated invasion. New units could be arriving. Hoffmann elevates his report to division level. If British tanks are massing in the Loire, the Wehrmacht needs to know. Panzer reserves might need repositioning. His report joins thousands of others. fragments of intelligence pieced together by analysts trying to predict where and when the invasion will strike. This is precisely what Operation Whisper's architects intended. Every phantom transmission adds another data point to German intelligence, another thread in a tapestry of deception. The Germans cannot ignore any signal. Each might represent genuine threat. So they must investigate, allocate resources, adjust deployments based on information that is entirely fabricated. Part 3. Expansion and Evolution. By March 1944, Operation Whisper has expanded to include 7 teams operating across northern France. Each team runs an independent false network, transmitting traffic that suggests different phantom formations. Some pose as American units, others as British or Canadian. Their transmissions are coordinated from London, where operation planners maintain elaborate scripts ensuring that false traffic remains internally consistent and plausibly interconnected. The technical evolution is continuous. Early transmissions used simple continuous wave Morse, but German analysts noticed that some Allied units employ voice radio, amplitude modulation voice transmissions for tactical communications at shorter ranges. So Whisper teams begin incorporating voice broadcasts using captured or replicated Allied radio equipment. The Model 17 Mark II suitcase set can transmit voice, though its range is limited and the power drain severe. Teams use it sparingly, broadcasting brief tactical exchanges between phantom units, creating the impression of active military operations. A team operating near Rouen, led by a Polish SOE officer and an American signal sergeant, establishes an elaborate deception network, suggesting an American airborne division preparing for operations. Their transmissions include logistical chatter, administrative communications, even simulated radio checks between aircraft and ground stations. They transmit from a church tower, antenna wire disguised as lightning conductor, the transmitter concealed in the bell chamber. Local villagers know something unusual is happening, but ask no questions. The church priest, a resistant sympathizer, stands watch during transmissions, ready to signal if German patrols approach. The operation's sophistication increases with experience. Teams begin incorporating deliberate operator errors, brief accidental transmissions in clear, quickly corrected, missed procedurals that suggest hasty or inexperienced operators, even simulated equipment malfunctions. Real military radio nets are imperfect, filled with human error and technical problems. The deceptions must mirror this authenticity. One team, operating from a farmhouse near Cannes, deliberately transmits slightly off frequency, suggesting a transmitter with drifting crystals, a common problem with field equipment. The error is calculated, noticeable enough to seem authentic, not so severe that Germans dismiss the traffic as unreliable. The team's operator, a former Canadian Army signaler, keys with a distinctive fist he developed during training, slightly arrhythmic, as though working under stress. German operators monitoring his transmissions begin recognizing his style, tracking him across multiple transmission sessions, building a file on what they believe is a genuine Allied radio operator. Part 4. The Hunt. German countermeasures intensify. By April, Wehrmacht signals intelligence has identified multiple suspicious transmission sources across occupied France. Some match known Allied patterns. Others deviate in subtle ways that suggest deception. But determining which signals are genuine and which are false is nearly impossible without confirmation from other intelligence sources. Direction-finding operations become more aggressive. Mobile DF units, operating from camouflage trucks, prowl the countryside, attempting to locate transmission sources. Each unit carries a rotating loop antenna mounted on the vehicle roof, connected to specialized receivers. The equipment is German manufactured, Telefunken receivers, precision direction finding loops calibrated for accuracy. 2 operators work in each truck, one manipulating the antenna, while the other watches a needle indicator, noting the precise bearing of maximum signal strength. The DF vans are effective but not infallible. Atmospheric conditions affect radio propagation unpredictably. Signals reflect off the ionosphere, bounce off terrain features, producing multiple apparent bearings. A transmitter supposedly located in one direction might actually be in another, and competent operators can exploit this, transmitting briefly, then relocating, using low power to reduce detection range, employing antennas with directional characteristics that mask their true position. Wickham's team, now operating from a safe house in a village outside Le Mans, develops evasion techniques. They never transmit from the same location twice consecutively. Their transmissions are timed to coincide with genuine Allied signals traffic, making isolation difficult for German operators. They use minimum power necessary for reliable communication, reducing their electromagnetic signature, and they maintain constant movement, relocating every few days, staying ahead of DF operations. But the pressure is constant. In late April, a whisper team near Dieppe is compromised. German direction finding units triangulate their position during an extended transmission. The Gestapo raids the farmhouse where they operate. The team escapes, barely, warned by a resistance lookout who spots the approaching trucks. They abandon their equipment, melting into the countryside with only their cipher materials and forged papers. The transmitter is captured, but its capture reveals nothing operational. It is standard British equipment, its possession confirming only what Germans already know, that Allied teams operate in France. The incident produces immediate changes to operational protocol. Transmission times are reduced further, never more than 3 minutes. Teams are instructed to establish multiple fallback sites, never remaining in one location more than 48 hours. New counter-DF tactics are deployed, transmitting from moving vehicles, using rapidly deployable antennas that can be erected and struck in minutes, employing diversionary transmissions to confuse German bearings. Part 5, the human element. The psychological strain on operators is immense. They work in enemy territory, constantly hunted, transmitting signals that mark their presence to sophisticated German detection equipment. Sleep deprivation is chronic. The valves in their transmitters require time to warm up, producing operational delays that heighten exposure during transmission. Battery management is critical. The sets drain power rapidly, and obtaining replacement batteries without arousing suspicion is difficult. Local civilians who shelter the teams risk execution if discovered. The Germans regard radio operations as espionage, punishable by death. Yet many French citizens choose to help. The widow whose farm hosted Wickham's initial transmissions continues providing support, despite the danger. A baker in Le Mans allows a team to transmit from his shop cellar, maintaining normal business above while electromagnetic signals pulse through the floorboards. A schoolteacher hides cipher materials in her classroom, cached among textbooks and children's assignments. But collaboration is not universal. Occupied France contains collaborators and informants. Some betray for ideology, others for money or coercion. A team operating near Amiens is betrayed by a farmer who reports suspicious activity to local authorities. The team receives warning from resistance contacts and evacuates hours before a Gestapo raid. The farmer is found dead 3 days later. Resistance justice, brutal and immediate. The moral calculus of deception operations is complex. Every false transmission that diverts German forces might save Allied lives during the invasion. But the operations endanger French civilians who provide support, drawing German attention to areas where resistance networks operate. Operators grapple with this knowledge. They are not conventional soldiers fighting conventional battles. They are deceivers, manipulating enemy perceptions through fabricated information, and their success is measured in German confusion and misdirected resources. Martin, the American OSS specialist working with Wickham, keeps a journal against regulations, but he does it anyway. His entries, later recovered and preserved in OSS archives, reveal the psychological toll. He writes about the tension of transmitting, knowing that every keyed letter might be his last. He describes the exhaustion of constant movement, sleeping in different locations nightly, never able to relax fully. He notes the faces of civilians who help them, People whose names he often does not know, who risk everything for strangers representing distant governments fighting a war that has already cost France dearly. Part 6, Strategic Impact. By May 1944, Operation Whisper has successfully introduced 7 phantom formations into German intelligence assessments. Wehrmacht situation maps now show Allied units that do not exist, positioned in locations where no Allied forces are present. The deception is not perfect. German intelligence remains uncertain about many details, but uncertainty itself is valuable. Resources allocated to counter phantom threats are resources unavailable to defend actual invasion beaches. One phantom formation, a fictitious American armor division supposedly concentrated near Orleans, ties down an entire German mechanized regiment. Wehrmacht intelligence, synthesizing multiple sources including Whisper's false transmissions, concludes that the Phantom Division represents a genuine threat to German positions along the Loire. The mechanized regiment is positioned to counter this threat, holding defensive positions far from the actual invasion beaches in Normandy. The deception's value is multiplicative. False radio traffic is corroborated by other deception measures, double agents providing false information, fraudulent documents, even physical decoys like dummy aircraft positioned at airfields where German reconnaissance can photograph them. The radio transmissions provide the audible component of an elaborate theater, and German intelligence, unable to verify or refute the signals definitively, accepts them as probable truth. In London, Operation Whisper's planners track German responses through Ultra, the Allied signals intelligence program that has broken German Enigma encryption. They read German situation reports, watch as Wehrmacht units reposition based on false intelligence, adjust Whisper transmissions to reinforce German misconceptions. It is a feedback loop of deception. Fake signals produce genuine German responses, which inform further fake signals, which produce further responses. The operation is not without failures. Some false transmissions are dismissed by German analysts as implausible. Others are detected but deprioritized amid the overwhelming volume of genuine Allied communications. German intelligence is not naive. They know allies employ deception. But separating real from false requires resources and time that the Wehrmacht, in May 1944, cannot spare. So they hedge, treating some phantom formations as probable, others as possible. All is worthy of some level of defensive attention. Part 7, June approaches. As Invasion Day approaches, Operation Whisper shifts focus. The phantom formations that spent months establishing themselves through false radio traffic now begin simulating preparations for offensive operations. Transmission volume increases. The content becomes more urgent. Logistical rush orders, increased administrative chatter, changes in call signs suggesting unit reorganization. Wickham's team, now operating from a location near Argent, transmits a scripted series of messages suggesting ammunition resupply requests for Phantom tank battalions. The transmissions are timed to coincide with genuine increased Allied radio activity as actual invasion forces conduct final preparations. The false blends with the true, becoming indistinguishable in the electromagnetic cacophony. German direction finding operations reach peak intensity. Hoffman, the signals intelligence officer monitoring Allied traffic from his Chateau operations room, works 18-hour days, attempting to compile accurate assessments from the flood of intercepts. He identifies the increased transmission volume, notes the changing patterns, reports upward that Allied radio activity suggests imminent operations. His reports are accurate. Operations are imminent, but his understanding of where and by whom is corrupted by Whisper's false traffic. The Rouen team, operating from their church tower position, conducts their final transmissions in early June. They broadcast voice traffic simulating American airborne units conducting equipment checks, using actual U.S. Army radio procedure and nomenclature learned from capture documents and recordings. German monitors record the transmissions, noting the presence of apparent American airborne forces in the Rouen sector. Wehrmacht intelligence adds this data to their invasion assessments. Some analysts predict landings near the Seine estuary. Others anticipate operations further west. The uncertainty is intentional, the product of months of careful deception. Part 8. Aftermath. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces land on 5 beaches in Normandy. The invasion succeeds despite fierce German resistance, establishing a beachhead that will eventually liberate France. Operation Whisper's contribution is difficult to quantify precisely. Strategic deception effects are always ambiguous, but post-war analysis suggests the operation succeeded in confusing German intelligence about Allied intentions and capabilities. The phantom formations created through false radio traffic contributed to German indecision during critical hours following the landings. Wehrmacht reserves position to counter non-existent threats in the Loire Valley and near Rouen were not immediately available to reinforce Normandy beaches. By the time German commanders recognized the actual invasion location and began repositioning forces, the Allies had established themselves firmly ashore. Most Whisper teams cease operations after D-Day, their mission complete. Equipment is cached or destroyed. Operators either remain in France to support resistance operations or are extracted back to Britain. Some are reassigned to continue deception operations in support of the Allied advance across France. The phantom formations dissolve into the electromagnetic ether from which they were conjured, leaving behind only German intelligence files and British operational reports. Wickham returns to England in July, evacuated through an SOE exfiltration network. His war continues. He is assigned to additional deception operations in support of Market Garden and later Rhine crossing operations. He survives the war and returns to civilian life, never speaking publicly about his work in occupied France. Martin, the American OSS specialist, remains in France through liberation, attached to advancing American units as Signals Intelligence Advisor. His journal, confiscated by security officers after the war, remains classified until 1978. The widow whose farm hosted the first transmissions survives the occupation. After liberation, she receives recognition from the French government for her assistance to Allied operations, though the specific nature of what occurred in her barn remains classified. The baker in Le Mans continues operating his shop. The schoolteacher returns to her classroom. The priest remains in his church with its tower that once concealed a transmitter aimed at deceiving an occupying army. Epilogue: The Invisible War. Operation Whisper exemplifies a particular type of warfare, one fought not with weapons, but with information, where success is measured in enemy confusion rather than casualties. The operations architects understood that modern military forces depend critically on intelligence, that armies move and fight based on their understanding of enemy positions and intentions. Corrupt that understanding through carefully constructed deception. And you can manipulate enemy behavior as effectively as any kinetic weapon. The technical achievement was significant, creating false radio traffic sufficiently authentic to deceive. Sophisticated German signals intelligence required understanding not just radio technology, but the sociology of military communications, how units actually talk to each other, the rhythms and patterns of genuine traffic, the inevitable errors and inefficiencies that characterize real operations. The teams in occupied France needed to become convincing actors, performing their roles flawlessly in a medium where any mistake could expose the deception or cost them their lives. The human achievement was perhaps greater. The operators, technicians, and support personnel who executed Whisper worked under conditions of extreme stress in enemy territory, transmitting signals that marked their locations for German direction finding, depending on civilian cooperation in a society divided by occupation. Their success required not just technical skill, but courage, improvisation, and the ability to function effectively while constantly hunted. Post-war declassification of Operation Whisper occurred gradually, with some details remaining restricted into the 1980s. The operation's existence was acknowledged in official histories, but specific technical details, locations, and personnel identities remain protected. Former participants were bound by Official Secrets Act restrictions, and most took their detailed memories to their graves. What remains are fragments, declassified operation orders, after-action reports, captured German intelligence assessments showing the phantom formations that Whisper created. The actual transmitters used, the Mark II suitcase sets, the portable antennas, the cipher materials, are scattered across museums and archives, artifacts of an invisible war fought in the electromagnetic spectrum. And scattered across Normandy, the Loire Valley, and northern France are the locations where false transmissions once pulsed into the night. Farmhouse lofts, church towers, cellar hideouts, now return to their peacetime purposes. The oak tree where Wickham's first antenna wire was strung still stands, indistinguishable from any other tree in any other French field. The church tower in Rouen, where the Polish-American team broadcast their false airborne traffic, remains part of the village skyline, its bell still ringing for services, no marker indicating its wartime role. These places are unmarked memorials to an operation few people know existed, sites where the invisible war was fought and won through carefully keyed Morse code and scripted voice transmissions, where operators hunched over glowing valves in darkness, sending lies into the ether that shaped the course of history. The electromagnetic spectrum that carried Whisper's false signals is now crowded with civilian traffic. Radio, television, mobile communications, layer upon layer of modern transmissions filling frequencies that once carried phantom military formations. But in 1944, in the darkness before invasion, those same frequencies carried a different kind of message. Carefully constructed deceptions, transmitted by operators who knew that every keyed letter might be their last, creating phantom armies from nothing more than electromagnetic waves and German uncertainty. This was their war, fought in darkness, measured in German confusion, successful not through destruction, but through deception. And when the actual invasion came, when real armies landed on real beaches and fought real battles for liberation, Operation Whisper's phantom formations had already done their work, drawing German resources away from where they were needed, introducing uncertainty into enemy planning, buying time and space for the soldiers who would storm the beaches at dawn. The transmitters are silent now. The operators are gone. The frequencies have been reassigned. But the operation's legacy persists in military doctrine, in the understanding that information warfare can be as decisive as kinetic action, that a well-crafted lie can sometimes save more lives than any weapon. In the fields and villages of France, where Whisper teams once transmitted their false signals into the night, life continues undisturbed. The earth remembers nothing. The air carries no trace of those wartime transmissions, faded now beyond any possibility of recovery. But the operation succeeded, and in its success, it demonstrated something profound about modern warfare. That the most effective weapons are sometimes invisible, the most decisive battles fought in the electromagnetic spectrum, and the truest victory sometimes comes not from destroying the enemy, but from making them believe what is not true. Operation Whisper was never intended to be remembered. It succeeded precisely because it remained invisible, its phantom formations convincing enough to shape German behavior without ever existing beyond radio waves and enemy imagination. That invisibility was its strength, and remains, perhaps, its most appropriate memorial.